Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the first episode of the British Muslim Women's Podcast. My name is Dur-e-Shewar, and I'm here with Nooresahar and Mahrukh. Happy International Women's Day, everyone! Last year, the Voice of British Muslim Women's blog posted a number of articles about motherhood. This year, with our first ever podcast episode, we want to talk a little bit about sisterhood. Historically, women have come up against a lot, and we've worked hard to break glass ceilings, to challenge expectations, and overcome stereotypes. There are successful female leaders in all fields, but through it all, how have we treated one another? What is the shape of our sisterhood? Women are often pitted against one another or take it upon themselves to judge or criticize the choices of other women. And this impact is felt amongst many women. So how has that competition impacted our female unity? Nooresahar?
Assalamu alaikum. I think that competition in itself is not inherently a bad thing, but I think it's interesting to think about how competition manifests itself between women. So I was reading this article recently about how women learn that we aren't supposed to be competitive or win at somebody else's expense. So it's difficult for us to express competitiveness between ourselves, even in a friendly way. So we might not, for example, feel comfortable saying to a friend, "You did so well in that exam, so I'm going to try and do even better than you." Instead, these competitive feelings can be inhibited and channeled into feelings of envy or jealousy or be laced with guilt, which pushes us to behave in a way that's much more passive. I think this is something that as women, we have to actively work against. It's so normalized for us to feel the need to compare ourselves to other women. Like, how many times have we looked at another woman's educational achievements, appearance, personality, and felt lesser next to her? This isn't necessarily a bad thing if it motivates us to work harder without having negative feelings towards that other person. But as I've mentioned, that's not always the effect that competitive feelings have on us. Because we don't feel as comfortable as men in succeeding at the expense of others, we can be resentful if we see other women who are high achievers, or guilty if it's us who is achieving highly. Rather than women's achievement being a motivator, it can make us more insecure about ourselves. So, I read a quote in an opinion piece on this topic of competition amongst women, which I really liked, which was, "We aren't competing with other women ultimately, but with ourselves, with how we think of ourselves." So, whilst we think about sisterhood, I think it's really valuable to also think about our relationship to competition, especially as Ahmadi Muslim women in the context of our faith. How do we develop a sense of competition that doesn't make us feel inferior or push us to resent other women? And then how might our faith guide us in this?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said at the start, that competition doesn't have to actually be a bad thing. It all depends on the parameters that we're competing in. Faith is a great way to get some perspective. As Ahmadi Muslims, we believe that the teachings of Islam are designed to be in harmony with our human nature. The holy founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the promised Messiah, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be on him, in his book, The Philosophy of the Teachings of Islam, explains that through Islam, humans are able to refine their natural inclinations so that they develop into moral and eventually spiritual qualities. Ambition, the desire to compete and to succeed, it's a natural inclination in all of us. Unfortunately, though, like you said, competition amongst women has historically become something very sour and divisive. If we look at the teachings of the Holy Quran, they offer a unique perspective. So healthy competition is encouraged in order to bring out the best rather than the worst in everyone. In chapter 2, verse 149 of the Holy Quran, it says, and I quote, "And everyone has a goal which dominates him. Vie then with one another in good works." So the first part of this statement acknowledges our natural inclination towards ambition and competition, saying that everyone has a goal. But competing in a manner that involves belittling or getting one up on someone else is never going to be fruitful in the long term. As the Holy Quran explains, the best way to channel a competitive drive is by doing good works. I'm sure you guys will remember Ishtamaz. As MD girls, we have all had our ambitions and competitive natures encouraged and stimulated within the framework of our faith. As part of Nasrat and Lajna, which are the two female auxiliary groups within the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we are challenged at local and national level to partake in charitable works. And we hold annual competitions where we participate in a number of events, including public speaking, Quran recitations, spoken word poetry, sports, art, and so much more. And it's attended by women from across the country, all from a number of different backgrounds. And these events, they challenge us to achieve, they give us an incentive to push ourselves, but also give us an opportunity to work with each other, to share ideas, and to learn a lot from one another. And I think in those environments, the feeling of sisterhood is just so immense.
All right.
Definitely.
All this is to say that competition doesn't need to be the antithesis of social harmony and sisterhood. We all have drive to achieve, and our faith encourages to do so, but it reminds us that this achievement shouldn't be at the expense of others, rather it should be through serving others. This way, we can tease apart the brilliance of accomplishment from the negativity of arrogance. By focusing our competitive energy into striving to do good works and making sincere efforts to recognize the good works of others, we're able to reform our own character and uplift the women around us too.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely true. I think when we realize that this competition to do good work is done only for the sake of God, then we truly, fulfill the purpose and word of the Quran. Because that's when the ego that whisper things like, oh, I want to be recognized for this. Why is she getting more space than me? All these kind of feelings, they vanish. And that's when the true spirit of sisterhood flourishes, only when we look at other women as our equals. I think, there's a lot of talks recently, you can hear it anywhere, about gender equality, about how it's important for women and men to be seen as equals. But I think there's not enough, we don't talk enough about how it's important to work for that equality among women as well. I can take a personal example here. When I decided to wear the hijab, I received a huge backlash from my friends, and most of them were women, they were feminist. And that part hurt me the most, because I thought, being a woman, they would understand how important having the freedom to choose what I feel is best for myself is. And more generally, if you look at history, women have faced so many challenges. They've had to fight for almost every right, be it the right to vote, the right to divorce, to inherit, and so on. And so here I was, fully mastering my choice. And yet so many women looked down upon my choice and implied that I was forced, by the men of my family for wearing the hijab. And, that goes along a bit with what you said, Dur-e-Shewar, about how women need to uplift one another rather than constantly, judging and feeling threatened by one another's success. I think we need to learn and normalize being inspired by one another. The annual convention of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, the Jalsa Salana, as you must know, girls, is one of the occasions when we actually witness that, that sense of sisterhood and that sense of coming together as one community, and where women are uplifting one another. And it's truly amazing in that sense that you see all these women, they're working together, yet showcasing a great sense of independence. I mean, it's not every day that you see, scientists, doctors, engineers, lawyers, business women, or even housewives, among coming all together and cleaning toilets, serving meals, managing security, hosting tens of thousands of guests from around the world without the help of a single man. I mean, this is just astonishing, and it's just amazing to see that at the Jalsa Salana. Yeah. And just like, the current head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community said, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may Allah be his helper, that women do flourish better without the shade of men. And the spirit of sisterhood on Jalsa Salana is just on point, is a living testimony of that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Mahrukh. One of the great things about being part of Lajna, or rather having a specific women's auxiliary group within our community, is that it grants women complete functional autonomy. We have the opportunity to develop a whole host of skills to take on roles of both spiritual and secular leadership. As you mentioned, at our annual conventions, our Jalsa Salana, and our competitive events, women come together regardless of ethnicity, culture, academic achievement, socio-economic background, or any other perceivable difference, in order to work together to achieve the ultimate goal of moral and spiritual development. And I think this is where our sisterhood can flourish.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining me. And thank you listeners, for joining us on this episode of British Muslim Women's Podcast.